Hi guys, so welcome back. I decided to try again this book comparison video thing that everybody seems to like.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
Definitely go check out my very first attempt called If You Like This, Try This. I think that one went over okay, but I decided to try something new, as you can probably tell from the video title. So if you didn't like this book, then I'm going to recommend one to try. What I tried to do with this one is whatever this one was missing, I decided to try to find a book that had the thing that was missing from the first one. So let's see how I did. Please let me know in the comments down below if you like this one. And if you do, maybe we can do some more. Remember that it's okay to like both of the books and check them out even if you liked the first one. So to start with, I have Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan. Yeah, I think it's Richard Morgan. Anyway, this book is particularly well loved. However, it is also very well known for being dark and gritty. It has some very descriptive scenes of things like sexual violence, some animal abuse that is very, very hard for me to read. And if you like the philosophy in this book, if you like this kind of vibe, but you don't want to suffer through some of those descriptive violence type of scenes, I would recommend the book Ymir by Rich Larson. Now remember that these stories are not the exact same, but this book follows our main character, Yorick, who is a company man, and he is asked to go home to his planet of Ymir to fight a Grendel. That's right, this book has some superficial overtones of Beowulf, which is very fun and something I've never seen before. This book has that gritty, dark underbelly vibe because when we get to the main home planet, we discover that Yorick is considered to be, I'm going to say, a traitor to his entire race. And he is not well loved. He does not want to be there. He has to do a lot of self-forgiveness and self-delusion in terms of gene hacking and manipulation, as well as self-forgiveness with drug use, that kind of stuff. But it's still not as quite dark and violent as Altered Carbon is. However, I do think that you should check out this book. I think that you should also know, though, there is no alternate reality VR video game in Ymir. The whole thing is just set in real life. So if that sounds like something up your alley, definitely check it out. The next one on this list is going to be The Martian by Andy Weir. I know it's shocking that some people don't love this book because I loved it. However, not everyone does. And I think that most of the one-star reviews that I have read have said that if you didn't like the main character's personality or sense of humor, it was a really long book. And I can kind of see that. So if you really liked that space survival idea, but you didn't get along with the character, or if you want more space survival, I recommend Fall into Moondust by Arthur C. Clarke. This book is also one that definitely focuses on a survival story of a group of people who are on a tour bus on the moon, and they crash. And it must survive with the technology that was around at the time that the book was written. This one was written a little bit earlier than was The Martian, so there's a lot more technology in The Martian that's available. However, this one was just as good in my opinion. It wasn't on the edge of your seat and there wasn't any funny, quirky commentary, but it was a slow, plodding, and a little bit methodical way of how would we survive somebody who is crashed on the moon who cannot get out. I thought this one was a good alternative to The Martian. You'll have to let me know if you agree in the comments down below. The next one is going to be Jade City, Jade War, and Jade Legacy series by Fonda Lee. This is a very well-known, very beloved series about a family of Asian gangsters. And it is a fantasy novel, so there is powers involved. However, I just didn't connect to the characters, and I kind of lean a lot more towards science fiction than I do fantasy. And so I thought a really good alternative, if you're kind of in that boat with me, is to check out 36 Streets by T. Knepper. This book is a cyberpunk vibe that takes place in the future of Hanoi in Vietnam, where we follow a female main character who is a gangster in the underbelly of Hanoi. and she is involved in this big plot VR video game that was released that is not what it appears. There's a lot of complexity in this book. There is also a lot of drug use, so you have to be okay with that. But I did feel like these vibes, the atmosphere was very, very similar, although this one definitely leans a lot more into science fiction and obviously is only a standalone. So there's not quite as much character development as there was in the Jade City stuff. Moving on. Our next one is Starfish by Peter Watts. Now, I know that Peter Watts is often hard to compare. However, I read Starfish after I read Blind Sight, and I felt like while the atmosphere of this book was fantastic, I really found that a lot of the themes and a lot of the philosophical concepts that blew me away when I first read Blind Sight were sort of repeated in Starfish, and I was wishing for a lot more interaction with a first contact kind of situation. I was hoping for a little bit more action as well, and I got that in the book A Darkling Sea by James Cambias. Now, this one is not quite as philosophical as Peter Watts, but who is, right? However, this one has a lot more action. It was the same under the sea kind of first contact vibes. We're following a human team who has explored an ocean planet, and they discover sentient life for the second time. They are trying to race against the original aliens that we have discovered, the sentient species, and both teams are trying to fight over friendship with the new sentient species that is discovered. And this second species gets a lot of mixed messages, and it's a really interesting stuck in the middle between two sentient races when they didn't know there were any. This one is very action-packed, and it feels like a movie because James Cambias is very well known for his movie scripts. So if you were just wanting a little bit more action, you were wanting a little bit more information about the aliens, this is definitely a book that you should check out. Okay, the next one is a book that I've talked about a lot on my channel, and it's called Little Fuzzies by H. Beam Piper. It was rewritten by John Scalzi under the name Fuzzy Nation with permission. These are the exact same stories, they're just written with slightly different styles. However, a lot of people who didn't like them, which again, I can't believe they didn't like, because I mean, I recommended them, come on, right? These two books, if you thought that they were a little bit, I'm going to call it like naively optimistic about humans' interactions with these cute fuzzy alien creatures, I would say that the book for you to read is A Word for World is Forest by Ursula Le Guin. This one is a novella, and yet it has all of the things Little Fuzzy had, or Fuzzy Nation. It has the tiny cute fuzzy creatures, but it has more realistic or potentially pessimistic views of how humans would interact with these creatures. There's a lot more action and there's a lot more intensity in this little tiny novella. So if you liked these books, or if you didn't like them because of the optimistically naive nature of them, definitely check out Ursula Le Guin's A Word for World is Forest. Good one. Next is the book Neuromancer by William Gibson. Now, I understand that this has a historical significance, as do many of the books on this list, but I did not vibe with Neuromancer. I didn't connect with the character. I didn't find it realistic. I get that he invented the word cyberspace. That's all cool. I didn't like it. I did not enjoy this book. And a lot of the things that I wished for in this book are things that I found in John Brunner's Shockwave Rider. So this is an early book right before cyberpunk was a thing. So there's like the early inklings of like some VR virtual reality type games. And it's definitely the story structure that I would expect with or be a predecessor of the story structure of a lot of the cyberpunk stuff without being cyberpunk yet. And I liked these characters. I understood the storyline of what was happening a lot better. So if you liked the idea of Neuromancer and you liked seeing the early ideas of what cyberspace and cyberpunk was, but you wanted to see like the predecessor, definitely check out Shockwave Rider by John Brunner. Again, it's a little dated, but I really got what I wanted out of Neuromancer from this book, and I hope to continue to find some cyberpunk novels that I'm finally liking. So the next book on this list is also a historically significant book, and that is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. This book was very popularized, very important for the fact that she explored gender and sexuality and whether or not it's important or not in this book that's supposed to be groundbreaking and a beautiful love story. And I gotta tell you, if there weren't people online who were able to explain this book to me, I would not have gotten it on my own. It definitely feels like a high school English class all over again. I just didn't understand it the way that I feel like many other people just instinctively did. So if you're one of those people, congratulations, I was not. And I needed something a little bit easier to grasp and understand. And I found that in the book Steel Beach by John Varley. Now, don't get me wrong, this book is very much like a satirical parody book, and it opens even with some funny commentary about male special parts. However, what's really intriguing about the story in this one is the deep themes of mental depression. This main character struggles with suicidality a little bit, and it also just goes through this man's story, and the main character changes genders throughout the story on a whim whenever they want to, because all of humanity does that now. In the future, they have just randomly changed genders. And I felt like this book handled the subtlety of handling, genders and sexuality in a different, cool, easier to understand way than I got out of Left Hand of Darkness. So there's a recommendation for you there. Remember, if you need to have hate comments, I have an entire comment section down below. Sorry. Next is the book Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. I understand that this book was fantastic and I really had a good time with it, but not everybody did. A lot of people found this book to be particularly slow, and I found myself wishing that while we're exploring this unknown object in space, I wanted there to be a good end, a reason for why I sat through all of the methodical and interesting pieces of what we were exploring. And we didn't really get all of the answers that I wanted out of Rendezvous with Rama. We didn't learn as much as I wanted there to be. And so my recommendation, besides reading the second book, which I've heard is terrible, by the way, is to read Inherit the Stars by James Hogan. Now, again, this is a very different story. However, we have a body of an astronaut found on the moon, and we aren't missing anybody. So we date the body and discover it's 50,000 years old, which is crazy because humanity hasn't been around spacefaring that long. And the more that we learn about who this astronaut is and the more methodical science that we apply to him, the more that we discover about our solar system and our universe. And I thought this book had a lot more speculative fiction elements of it. I thought it was a little bit more like imaginative and fun adventure story while using science to discover all of these things about this dead astronaut. And it had very similar vibes to Rendezvous with Rama in terms of the methodical, plotting way that we apply science and the discoveries that we discover. The discoveries we discover. Yes, I'm keeping that in. I just thought that a lot of what I was looking for in Rendezvous with Rama, without being told, was in Inherit the Stars. So you'll have to let me know, again, comments down below, if you agree, if you disagree, or if you have other recommendations. The next book on this list is going to be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I know that this is considered often one of the first, if not the first, ultimate science fiction novel. However, again with English class, this book, while I enjoy what it was and what it did for the genre, was kind of a hard read for me, especially because readers have changed and I really had to have a lot of discussion. I really needed a lot of people to help me digest this book. And I thought that a lot of what was discussed in this book could be found in a book called Sirius by Olaf Stapleton. I found Sirius to be an easily amazing to follow book that was very similar and very Frankensteinian in nature. We're following a dog that has been created in a lab with human intelligence. And it answers for us the question, if Frankenstein had loved his monster, what would have happened? Would we still have the same ending? Is it still the same horror novel, or would things have gone differently? And I really loved the book Sirius. I thought it added so much to the discussion, as well as repeated many questions that I had when I read Frankenstein and finally understood it for myself. So definitely one of those books that I think if you didn't quite get Frankenstein, consider reading Sirius by Olaf Stapleton. I recommend. And last on this list is Old Man's War by John Scalzi. I know it's surprising that some people may not like John Scalzi. It's just so easy to relate to most of his characters. However, I was kind of a little disappointed in the first book, especially because we have such a cool idea, which is, these older people who are valued for their wisdom and knowledge are given bodies and sent to the other side of the universe to fight a war. And this prolongs their life, but they also get new bodies. And how is this done? And what is this like? And I'm expecting big things out of this idea. And we really don't go very many places with it. I have gotten to 4 books in this series, and I'm still waiting for some of the explanation of it. I realize that this series is a little bit more supposed to be military sci-fi, and it's supposed to be just a good fun time rather than an explanation of deeper themes. However, I just wanted a little bit more of an explanation here, and I do think that this book is really hard to compare, but I got complete satisfaction out of depth of characters and a little bit more explanation by the book Dauntless, which is a Last Fleet book by Jack Campbell. This one is still a superficial military science fiction, but it has some of the tropes that I love, and it actually fully explains all of the ideas. I really liked that we're following Captain Blackjack Geary as he's awakened in a sleeper pod centuries after he saved his unit in the middle of a big battle. And as his last act, jumped into that pod and was found again centuries later. However, he's waking up to discover that he is a well-celebrated legendary hero for what he did. And he's given command of an entire fleet that is lost trying to get home to the Alliance. And the more he discovers that the war is still faring and that honor has sort of been forgotten about, he also has these really elevated expectations of meeting this hero's impossible standards that he can't meet. There's just a lot of really cool discussion in this book, a lot of ways in which he is avoiding conflict, teaching them about honor, and in doing that, he's also teaching the reader all of the things that we need to know about military and what makes a good military science fiction hero's journey. I really enjoyed this series so much. I really love every book I pick up, although I do have to say they spend a lot longer talking about things than I expected. So if you were just a little disappointed in Old Man's War and you wanted something that went just a tiny bit deeper with a little bit more action, I would definitely recommend the Lost Fleet series. And that does it, you guys. For this, if you didn't like this, try this book series. Let me know if this worked out or if you have any book recommendations for me in the comment section down below. And don't forget to check out my Discord. See you guys next time.